Hey, if you're learning Japanese, you may have thought to look into writing the language with a paintbrush. Um, Japanese and Chinese both struggle with the fact that historically the languages were not written with pens, they were not written with knives or other metal implements, they were written with a paintbrush. As you can see, this is what is called a brush pen. It simulates a real paintbrush, and the tip of it really is composed of a whole bunch of tiny hairs, tiny pieces of plastic, of course. They're not not made from an animal's hair, so that you will get the effect to some extent of a paintbrush. Unlike a real paintbrush, the ink is internal. The edges of this are squeezy. It is a soft shell pen. And so if you don't have as much ink in the brush as you like, you actually squeeze the body of the pen. You squeeze the cartridge, and that forces more ink into the tip, into the paintbrush, as it were. So I'm here doing the traditional Chinese character for medicine. The Japanese version simplifies that, puts two of the radicals are reduced to just two brush strokes. Modern Japanese. And as you see, if you take some time with it, you can get some of the effects that snobs hope for in their handwriting. I'm not doing a terribly snobby job here, but I'm just showing you can get a contrast between thick and thin brush strokes. You can get this effect of the paintbrush being lifted off the page and giving you sort of a faded out ending to your stroke and this sort of thing. However, it's an imperfect technology to say the least. You are constantly managing how much liquid is in the paintbrush tip, as I say, by squeezing it or otherwise fussing over it. If you're actually writing out a page of text at the size of normal characters, then, just put it this way. You would never use this to take notes in a classroom, and you would definitely not put it in your pocket and take it on an airplane, so you're limited to certain kind of desktop use. However, this fine tip, if you're willing to pay close attention, if you're looking with your eyes intently at the tip of the paintbrush, you can get a very fine line, not just a thick line. It's not only useful for poster size handwriting. Just giving two examples of common characters here. So these are both traditional Chinese. They're slightly different in their simplified forms as used in modern Japanese, but I'm using the traditional character so you see sort of complex and fussy character. I have relatively big hands. So this is the size of normal text. You might take notes. There are some coins for scale. So yes, it is possible, even though this is a big contraption, this is a sort of big fussy looking pen, you can use a brush pen to get very fine lines that way. But again, your whole focus, it is not like writing with a ballpoint pen, is going to be watching the tip of the pen move. Now, the reality is, so that is a brush pen, also called in English a full brush pen. What I think the majority of people use the majority of the time, definitely this was true in Taiwan. In Taiwan, most of the pens we're buying were made in Japan, is this. This is a sort of hybrid. This is a calligraphy pen that really is a marker. So the tip of that is just a solid piece of felt with ink from an internal cartridge, and you do not get any of these effects. You get a slightly specially shaped marker. Now, you can take that to the classroom. You can carry that in your pocket. The problem is, really, it's only good for sort of poster size writing, not for small, fine handwriting, and you don't get the type of aesthetic effects that snobs are looking for. So this same company that made the full brush pen I've shown you, although there are many, there are also these hybrid pens. So this is a brush pen adapted so you can carry it in your pocket. You now cannot squeeze this. It's a hard shell. And when you take off the top, again, if you look carefully, you can see this does have fine bristles, I suppose is the word I'm looking for. All right, this time we'll do the Japanese versions of the character. But actually, I can see the problem already here. So I can't control how much ink is really flowing through this. With a real paintbrush, needless to say, you would control the ink by actually placing it on an inkstone or dipping it into an ink well or what have you. Playing fast and loose with brushstroke order here. Actually, you can see right there. This is an inferior technology. Does not work as well. This example turned out better than these. And you can see I can't actually control how much ink is flowing through it. But I guess, if what you want is to get the sort of sketchy paintbrush effect, you can do that with either pen. Not really a useful aspect of the technology. Now, historically, Chinese and Japanese are perhaps extraordinary in having these problems. European calligraphy, this is the sort of thing that gets sold these days. This is a high-tech calligraphy pen with a solid steel tip. This is called a parallel pen because the tip is made of two parallel pieces of steel. It will never wear down or wear out. Very difficult to use for Asian languages at a small scale or with larger characters. The differences may be subtle, but again, European calligraphy versus East Asian calligraphy, or just handwriting, just being able to practice the language, take notes, it's amazing how worthless this sort of thing is compared to even the sort of mediocre hybrid approach mentioned. It's more like a marker. The Japanese have a huge variety of these things. What I'm showing you now, this is a sort of high-tech, supposedly hybrid pen for calligraphy. To make a long story short, I don't recommend these. They really don't work out. These basically have a ton of ink flowing through the tip, so you can get some calligraphy-like effects, but you're basically stuck with either using a brush pen or struggling along with a good quality ballpoint pen. And the Japanese do make, these are for illustration. This is the Jelly Roll. They do make ballpoint pens that work well enough to write Japanese in a classroom. Although the problem is with all ballpoint pens, frankly, even conventional Western fountain pens, your results will vary with the humidity, altitude because of air pressure, and temperature of where you're living. Believe me, I have experience with that. You could have the same pen perform very differently in Cambodia and then get on an airplane and go up to Yunnan in China, going from sea level in the tropics to 2,000 meters above sea level in a much colder climate, and get very different results trying to write Asian languages. So that's about it. As mentioned, Southeast Asian languages like Cambodian, Sinhalese, Laotian, Burmese, language of Myanmar, they were actually written using a metal knife to scratch the character into a palm leaf, a leaf taken from a tree, was used as the medium of writing. Other languages, their history involved writing on leather, on vellum, on parchment, and so on. But for languages that developed with a paintbrush, still today, for your own education, really, you're probably going to be looking at struggling for some time at your desk with a paintbrush. Technologically, there's still no substitute for it.